Comic Book Savant, episode 367.
I know this. This I know. All that I have, all that is me, resides inside my poetry. And every time I write a rhyme, it might be the line that sets minds free. And also, I know that I don't.
Welcome back to the Comic Book Savant podcast. I'm your host, James Harris. This week is going to be a spoiler-filled review for the Black Panther movie. It was released last week. So if you haven't had a chance to see the movie yet, here is your 1 minute warning before I get into the episode. If you have not had a chance to see the movie yet, don't fret. If you go to youtube.com/comic book savant, I'll have a non-spoiler review list posted on the YouTube channel where I will do my no spoiler review and give you my thoughts of the movie if you're on the fence about if you're going to go see the movie or not. So that'll be available over on the YouTube channel. But if you if you've already have seen the movie and you want to talk about it and we dive into spoilers, this is where you're going to get that at. So this is your last warning before we get into the crux of the episode and start talking about the movie, because I don't want to ruin this movie for anyone. And it's definitely worth your time to go see. So with all that being said, I just want to give a shout out to my friends over at the Comics Podcast Network. You can find them over at comicspodcast.com. It is the best place that you want to go online to find more related content. If you like this podcast, you want to find more comic book related podcasts, it's the best place you can go. It's just one page that literally has hundreds of different podcasts related to comic books listed all in one place. You can find publisher specific, you can find team specific, you can find hero specific. So it's broken up into basically whatever you want to find in the world of comics. Some that might just cover like a particular show. It's so many different genres out there under comic book related podcasts at this point in time. So you can always find something extra that will hit a particular interest that you have if you want to dive deeper than what I cover on this particular podcast. Also, if you go over to comicbooksavant.com, I have links over to the Comic Podcast Network and other different podcasters that I've collaborated with over the years and that I'm friends with, that I highly recommend their shows. I've talked about them here and there. Just for a few examples, Serial at Midnight, which is just not a comic book related podcast. It's more into comics, movies, collecting, physical media. I've been friends with the host there for a very long time. He started out being a huge fan of the show. That's how we met, through doing the podcast, and him, reaching out and contacting me, and we, became friends, and we've been friends for as long as I've been doing this podcast. My boys over at Geek Brunch, which was a show that he helped start, but he later left. The host over there, they're good friends of mine. Raging Bullets is a DC specific podcast, so it's tons of listings all over the place on the website, and I implore you to use my website as a informational hub, because I have links to different things that I recommend, to different podcasts that I'm close to. So definitely take a moment, if you have never been over to comicbooksavant.com, to take a moment and check that out as well. That was an unintended plug, but I feel like certain times, like, I put a lot of work into the website to give you guys resources outside of when their particular podcast episodes out. I know my health is definitely been an issue, and I've talked about it in previous episodes. That's why it's kind of been a break in between. I thought I was going to have some episodes out in a timely manner the past couple of weeks. Just the situation that I'm dealing with. I thought I was going to get a clean bill of health from my doctor yesterday when I went in. It kind of went in a way I wasn't expecting, but I'm still going to try to make it work. I promise you guys, if you follow me on the Facebook page or on Instagram, I try to keep updates to let you guys know what was going on. I thought I was going to be back on schedule. I'm trying my best in between the health things that I'm dealing with to get the show back on track and on schedule and get the videos out in a timely manner. I'm going to be bedridden for a little while, so I might be doing some recording from my phone. So it might not, some of the episodes that might be coming out, because I'm going to try to pre-record some stuff too while I'm healing up from some of the stuff that I'm dealing with, that things will still come out when you guys expect them to come out for the show and for the YouTube channel. So I'm going to try to find creative ways to work around it to still keep delivering you guys content. I really didn't mean to get into all that then, but I guess this is the best time to talk about it before we start talking about the movie. Last but not least, I would like to give a shout out to the sponsor of this and every episode, which is InStockTrades.com. The best place to go online when you're looking for collected editions, Marvel Masterworks, Absolute Editions, anything that is a bound collected edition, comic book related. This is the place you want to go to first outside of going to Amazon. It's the one place that you want to go on the internet to fill those needs for your comic collection. I've been affiliated with them for about 14 or so years is the show. I've been doing the show for 12, going on 13, maybe going on 15 years, because I was dealing with them a couple of years before even starting a podcast. I've been a loyal customer of their service. They have discounts that range anywhere from 35, 42 up to 50% off. They have on their front page, they update it weekly. They have the deals of the week, which they're a 50% discount. If you're a U.S. customer and you place an order of $50 or more, you get free shipping within the U.S., which is a great thing to have. Now, if you happen to be an international listener, you still get all the great savings and discounts. You just don't get the free shipping. That's only for United States-based customers. But they still have some of the most competitive and cheapest international shipping rates around, so you still save a ton. So don't let that deter you from checking out the site and seeing what deals they have, because you can still make up the difference there and save a ton of money. But with all that being said and out of the way, let's jump into Black Panther. This is directed by Ryan Coogler, and it was written by Ryan Coogler and Joe Robert Cole. And the breakdown is as follows. T'Challa, after the death of his father, the king of Wakanda, returns home to the isolated, technologically advanced African nation to succeed to the throne and take his rightful place as king. And the cast is as follows. We have Andy Serkis as Ulysses Klaue. We have Chadwick Boseman as T'Challa / Black Panther. We have Martin Freeman as Everett K. Ross. Michael B. Jordan as Eric Killmonger. Daniel Kaluuya as W'Kabi. We have Sterling K. Brown as Njobu. We have Forrest Whitaker as Zuri. Angela Bassett as Ramonda. Lupita Nyong'o as Nakia. We have Diana Guerrera as Okoye is how it's pronounced. Winston Duke as M'Baku, and John Kanai as King T'Chaka. What I can say off the bat, this was a great movie. One of my favorites in the Marvel MCU. It's been a lot of stuff, and I didn't necessarily know how to approach it in talking about it in this episode. If you've listened to this show any amount of time, or you can't tell by my voice, I'm an African-American male. This movie was important for a lot of reasons that have nothing to do with the movie itself. But what I will say is the things that I'm going to talk about and relate it to why I like this movie and why it's one of my favorite movies has a part to do with perspective, but mainly to do with it was a solidly done movie. The casting was terrific from top to bottom. I don't feel like anyone disappointed on the casting. The actors they cast did their parts amazingly. The acting was top notch. The direction was top notch. It's amazing that Ryan Coogler is only 31 years old, and now he's done 3 movies. He's done Fruitvale Station, he's done Creed, and now he's done Black Panther. And I feel like he's improved with each movie and just being a very powerful storyteller. And he was able to pull this off because, they battered around the idea and concept of doing Black Panther movies all the way back since the late 90s, early 2000s with Wesley Snipes. That's when they first were talks, but Wesley Snipes had already did Blade for New Line, and I think they start talking about it around the time between the second and third Blade movie, between Blade 2 and Blade Trinity, that Wesley was interested in playing Black Panther as well. Then he had his, issues with tax evasion and all that kind of stuff, and so it never really came to fruition, but, they set this up extremely well. Captain America Civil War, they had already cast Chadwick Boseman as T'Challa. We got his, part of his origin and, in Captain America Civil War, which was awesome setup launching into this movie, even though this is still very much an origin story and follows some of the tropes of most Marvel origin stories. But it was well done because Wakanda was some place we first heard about all the way back in Avengers Age of Ultron, and now seeing it come to fruition. And I have to be honest, as an African American comics fan that has done a comics podcast for as many years as I have to say I'm not too familiar with Black Panther as far as comic wise. I know he's become more in the forefront probably in the past 10 to 15 years, and around about the time I've been doing the show, and I've done myself a disservice if I haven't read much about the character. Most of my exposure to Black Panther was with the Avengers cartoon that came out a few years ago. Before I think that cartoon came out right before Disney acquired Marvel, and then they switched it to, I think, Avengers Assembled. Black Panther was on that cartoon, and he was he's a major player on the team, so I got some of his background there, and through the movies, through Chadwick Boseman's portrayal in Captain America Civil War, which was my first exposure to Chadwick Boseman as well. I hadn't seen any of the other movies he acted in, and he really blew me away in that movie, so I was really hyped after the first trailers kind of hit the internet about this movie that it really looked good, which I was worried about that, because this is important to a large group of people, even myself, because I'm kind of included as being an African American in U.S. cinema, and it's not, and it's been this weird political, people have use this movie to further a whole bunch of different agendas, which I'm not here to do. I'm very much, if you've ever listened to the podcast and anything that I talk about, I keep politics out of what I do. I keep even race out of what I do, because to me, it's about community, and we're all comics fans. No one is excluded from being a comics fan based on race, religion, creed, sex. We are all comics fans, and that's what it's all about. I feel like these things should bring us together, not divide and pull us apart, and people have used their agendas to try to do that with this film. And it's about being a comics fan, enjoying it. It gets a lot of press on this was the most important, movie of all time. No, it's not. Is it important for a certain segment of people? Yes, because now you can see on the big screen, just like how Wonder Woman was important to females and young girls, being able to look up on the screen to say, hey, I have a female superhero in her own film. Was she the first female superhero we've seen on screen? No. We've had Black Widow, we've had Scarlet Witch, we've had female characters portrayed on screen doing heroic things. They hadn't had their own solo movie, so that gave it a little bit more mystique in the grand scheme of things, but it wasn't the first time ever, but it was executed extremely well. And sometimes it's all about the timing of when certain things hit the society or the overall zeitgeist of pop culture, if it drops at a particular time. And I think with it being Black History Month, and how it dropped and when it dropped, and a lot of things that's going on in the country, it dropped at a very important time in culture and history right now to have this hailstorm of attention that it's getting. You know, if we want to really be serious about it, we had movies like Blade back in 1998 that was a solo black superhero movie. So this is not the first movie we have. And that movie was very successful for the time. Now, comic book and superhero movies are not the multi-billion-dollar industry that it is today. That was, you know, when it was first starting to get to allow. If Blade wasn't made, we never would have had Black Panther, you know, at this point. So, you know, people get caught up in the, how can I say, get caught up in the hype of it all. But you have to pull it back and think of, it is an important movie, but it's not the first movie of this type, you know. But it is important because when it is hitting and who's doing it and the resources that went into it, wasn't a cheap throwaway movie. They, you know, Marvel backed it with their full support that they do with every movie they do. But again, all that being said and all that out of the way, I just want to say I hope, if you're not African American, because I've seen so much crazy stuff on social media about, you know, people felt like they, you know, if they were not black, they couldn't go see this movie and this crazy stuff. And it's just ridiculous. We're all comics fans. Go enjoy the darn movie and have a good time because it's a fun, enjoyable, pleasant movie. And everybody deserves to see it. And it, you know, it crushed. You know, I think for the 4-day holiday weekend, the movie made somewhere around $215 million. Amazing. I think in my wildest dreams, I thought maybe, you know, with all the positive press that the movie was getting, that maybe it'd do like 170, 175, but like 215, like this, that's phenomenal. And that's awesome that with that, maybe, you know, it'll allow DC to open up their eyes and still do that Cyborg movie, or we'll finally get that Black Widow movie. You know, then if we follow up with these things with Wonder Woman 2 is successful, we'll see more female heroes get their own movie, and Captain Marvel comes out. It will allow Marvel to keep pushing the boundaries of what's out there and keep trying things. You know, they're on a great roll right now. So, I just hope that this movie continues to do well, and it on both sides of the spectrum with both companies, with DC and Marvel, that they keep taking risks and keep trying these new things to keep giving us variations, because this will covering different characters, different coming from different places, male, female, gay, all those kind of things. That diversity will keep this genre fresh, so it won't get stagnant and die out like so many people in Hollywood that are against it is hoping it will. So I hope it allows them to keep taking these risks to keep the variety and the diversity going, because it's definitely what we need, and it will reflect the comics that we pick up and we read, you know, week to week, month to month. So, you know, for that, it's definitely important. Now back to the acting. I have to say, hands down, I think that I took some time to think about this because I love Loki, and everyone, you know, has said from the beginning, Loki was, you know, because we all know the MCU has had a villain problem. I feel like the past two movies, Spider-Man Homecoming and now Black Panther, has corrected that issue to the point where Eric Killmonger, to me, is one of the best villains in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Even it surpasses Loki. And I feel like Vulture even slightly edged out Loki as well, because it's not a perfect system on how the MCU does their movies, but I understand what they're doing because it's more about the heroes than the villain. You never want to have a situation like we had in Batman 1989, where as good as Michael Keaton was as Batman, it was clearly more a Joker-centric movie with Jack Nicholson as the Joker. It was more geared, and you don't ever want the villain to overshadow the hero. So you have to have that balance. Some people said that they felt like, you know, Michael B. Jordan wasn't in the movie enough as Eric Killmonger because he was very powerful on screen. And I feel like he was in the movie just enough that it didn't start to overshadow, because he was very strong in that role, and very good. And he was a good counterbalance to him, but he didn't need to be in the movie more, because if you had him in the movie any more than what he was, I felt like he would have outshined Chadwick Boseman. With no offense to Chadwick Boseman, but you run that risk if you give the villain a little too much time. But in the small amount of time he was on screen, you understood why he was doing what he was doing. You even at certain points sympathized with him on his agenda. You just didn't necessarily agree with to the lengths he went to accomplish his goals, but you understood why he could feel the way he could feel, and that was awesome. And he did that as well in Spider-Man: Homecoming with the Vulture character as well. So I feel like if they do it like that, they have the right framework built up to build up these villains a little bit stronger. It's going to be interesting to see in a few months how, with all the build up, how Thanos plays out, because they said the movie Infinity War is going to be shaded it's going to be more of a Thanos movie than a hero movie. So that'll be interesting. But it seems like they have a better handle on how to give the villains their right amount of shine without going too far, because that is a tight balancing act and balancing rope. You kind of have to walk tightrope. You have to walk when you're doing something like that. It's balance in a film. I feel like in this movie, even more so, coming off of Civil War, is that Chadwick Boseman showed that he's a bona fide true star to be reckoned with going in to the future, and he could be a big part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe moving forward. He took command. He was able to take command of the movie without hogging the movie. He allowed, with his performance, he allowed all his co-stars across the board to shine, from Eric B. Jordan to his immediate co-stars. When you get into Lupita Nyong'o, Winston Duke, Daniel Kaluuya, everyone that he was on screen with, he never like hogged the screen or overwhelmed the screen or chewed up the scenery. You'll hear that sometimes, that they'll say that actor just chews up the screen. He doesn't do that. He portrays that T'Challa and that regalness to the utmost, but at the same time he's subtle enough that everybody else can breathe and get their moments without him having to, I gotta be in the forefront. He's not forceful with it. He's very smooth and even keeled, and I feel like that is just phenomenal. So that stood out really strongly for me throughout watching the movie, and I feel like that's a true sign of a star, that he can play off so many different people without having to chew the scene, every scene that they're in. Two standout performances. It's so many standout performances in the movies, but I have to say I was really surprised by Andy Serkis. He was hilarious in the movie. He just had the most fun, and it's cool not seeing him as a CGI performer, but as a human performer, as him being himself, and just being on screen. And he was just so fun. I liked his take on Claw as something different to kind of fit in the Marvel MCU. Not so true, not 100% true. It's an interpretation of the different versions of Claw we've had in the comics over the years, but he just really had fun with it, and I was taken back on how funny he was. He was hilarious throughout the movie. Lupita Nyong'o, phenomenal. Really liked her. Her chemistry with Chadwick Boseman is off the charts, so I can't wait to see where that goes further. And Winston Duke. And sometimes you watch movies and you be like, I know who this guy is. And I couldn't place it. So, I get home and I look up on IMDb and I was like, okay, I know this guy. I used to watch this show called Person of Interest, one of my favorite shows. It was a CBS procedural show with Jim Caviezel and, what is his name? Michael Emerson, I want to say it's Michael Emerson. He was on Lost, and he's been on this current season of Arrow as Caden James. I want to say it's Michael Emerson. He later in the later seasons, going towards the end of the Person of Interest show, Winston Duke played one of the big bads on the show, and he was very terrifying and just very well acted in it. And that's where I knew him from. And he did such a good job where he was kind of terrifying at parts, but then he was so comedic and so funny in others. I was totally blown away, like, you know, because you really didn't see much of his character in any of the trailers or anything leading up to the movie. So to see him and see that he was such an integral part, and he was stern, but yet he was so hilarious when he needed to be, just caught me off guard. And I was really like, gosh, I can't wait to see where this goes further with him and, you know, T'Challa's relationship, because we know M'Baku, aka Man-Ape, which is a known villain of Black Panther, but in the Marvel MCU, is he going to turn into eventually evolve into the Man-Ape, or what? We know he comes in at the end of the movie and sides with T'Challa and helps him. But I'm going to talk about kind of some of my speculation going into the sequel, because we know with the movie making $250 million opening weekend, you know, for holiday weekend, 4-day weekend, making $210+ million, that is going to get a sequel. So I'm going to talk about some of my thoughts as far as where this might go coming down the pike. So let's see. One thing that I was concerned about when I first saw some of the trailers, that the special effects were a little lacking. When I actually got a chance to see the movie, I was surprised that the special effects didn't bother me nearly as much. I've heard other people reviewing it that kind of, you know, talk about comparing the final fight scene to like Spider-Man 3 and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, you know, and the movie was like too CGI heavy at the end. And that's the kind of, most of the comic book movies end with a super heavy CGI battle scene, you know, laden third act, and it bothered me less here. Again, I felt like special effects looked really bad at points in the trailer, but when I saw those finished scenes in the movie, they looked way more cleaned up. So again, it didn't stand out as much as they might have necessarily did in the trailer to the actual finished movie, which was, like I said, was a concern going in, but it still played off better than what I anticipated it to do. I felt like the story itself was very heartfelt and had a good message, and was able to carry that off without being too preachy or heavy-handed. You know, I apologize from the background. It's so windy here today, so I can hear it through my headphones. So I can imagine you might catch a little bit of it in the recording. So I apologize, but I can't help the weather outside. You know, some of the scenes that stood out to me, and this is where I say certain things with movies are perspective. And I spoke about this when I talked about Guardians of the Galaxy 2 and how scenes between Star-Lord and Kurt Russell and Star-Lord and Michael Rooker's character, how it related to me in my childhood. So it hit me in a special way, and I attached to that, so that movie raises up. Because you can have, you know, movies are not just a visual and mental stimulation thing too. Sometimes movies can be an emotional experience. And one thing that resonated with me was and made me connect to the movie was the scene where T'Challa first enters the spirit realm when he wins the challenge versus M'Baku, and he goes into the spirit realm and he sees his dad for the first time, and you know, that conversation he has with him, and it took everything for me not to cry during that scene, and how he felt responsible for his father's death, because, you know, I've dealt with guilt for a long time. You know, my father passed away going on about 6 years ago now, and I always felt responsible because I talked to my dad, you know, I think it was on a Thursday, And my dad, I normally, I lived maybe 10 at the time. I lived like 10 minutes away from my father, and we talked every day, multiple times a day. And we talked maybe 12 o'clock midnight that Thursday. So it was early Thursday morning. And I didn't hear from him Thursday, and the rest of Thursday I didn't hear from him Friday. So like Saturday morning comes up, and I had been calling him, leaving him messages, and it wasn't like for my dad not to return my calls. So I thought it was weird, but I thought, me and my dad would play sometimes. So I was like, maybe he's just, hanging out with his girlfriend or something, doesn't want to be bothered. So, I'll hear from him. But then Saturday morning comes, and I just start getting this weird feeling out throughout my body. And, I go to his house. I had a key to his house. And like I said, he was only like 10, maybe 15 minutes away from where I lived. Me and my wife lived at the time. And, I go in and I find his body. And I always felt a burden of guilt that if maybe I checked sooner, I could have saved my father's life. And so when I saw that scene, the guilt that he felt like that he couldn't protect his father, I felt that. And that was very emotional to me. And it affected me in a certain way because it was a very personal connection. Ryan Coogler had no idea what my personal experience was. He was telling a story, but it hit me in such a personal and close way that it affected me, and it emotionally affected me, and it connected me to this movie in a different way because I felt what T'Challa felt in that moment. I felt that same guilt in my own life, so it touched me in a certain way. And even, later in the later scenes, when he confronts his father and calls him out for his mistakes, I've had my parents were divorced when I was extremely young. And, I've had times where I had to confront both of my parents, not just my father, but at times when I was older and I understood certain things that happened that I wasn't privy to when I was, I was like 2 years old when they were divorced. So a lot of things I didn't know till I was an adult, and certain things came to light. And I confronted both of my parents, and have been and called them out on some of the things that happened, and I could relate to that. That's very, very personal. So again, those things hit me in a certain way that I wasn't expecting going into the movie. Had nothing to do with the hype and people saying it was good. It was when I was watching the movie in that moment, it hit me in that particular way and touched me to my core as a person and who I am. That made me feel something. You can like a movie and it can be like, oh, it's an awesome movie, it's a spectacle, but sometimes it's not all about the spectacle of the movie. It's what's being said in a movie and the craftsmanship of the movie to make you feel, not just to wow you, but make you feel something on the inside. And that's what this movie did. And that's why I say from perspective, it hits me in a particular way. Was it the best executed movie of the Marvel MCU? No, it was definitely flaws in the movie. I think one of the biggest flaws in the movie for me personally were the action scenes. I thought the action scenes were fun. They were definitely high energy. It kept within the tone of that the movie set. And it was and it's in the vibe of what we get to expect from a Marvel Cinematic Universe movie. I just thought that the fight scenes, the fight choreography were the one outstanding weak point in the movie, because when I think back of Captain America Civil War, and I had watched it not even a month ago, I watched it again, the scenes with T'Challa and when he's fighting Bucky and he's chasing them down and they're going at it. Those fight scenes were so tight and shot so well. And I was kind of thrown off because I think about the fight scenes and how Coogler set them up and shot them in Creed, that I wasn't expecting that kind of be the most disappointing part of the movie. Was the hand-to-hand combat kind of scenes, and even at the end fight scenes, I do feel like a little bit more CGI was used than what needed to be. I think the casino scene, one thing I didn't like, because the Russo brothers, how they shot stuff in Civil War, like it was a scene where T'Challa jumped up from like the I think Claw shot him and he fell down through a table, and then like he like lunged up. You could tell it was clearly like that part from him jumping from the table up with CGI. I was like, I'd rather him just had got up and ran up the stairs and like pounced up the stairs, and he did it straight forward instead of him like hopping up, because it was clearly CGI. And I thought it was always cool, like in the crazy shots where Chadwick was straight up fighting Bucky, and like he jumped down the stairs and like jumped down. It was him jumping, and you could see that, and it just looked better. And it was like it got a little bit too cartoony in how it came off, that I didn't want to see, because we know Chadwick could do it physically because we've already seen him do it physically. So I felt like he kind of leaned into the special effects a little bit too much in certain parts, where I would have preferred it would have been a little bit more practical than CGI. But that's where I feel like if I could, any one gripe I can have was that. But overall, I still give this movie a 10 out of 10. And you know, guys, that I don't throw 10s out of 10 just out there like that. That's just not how I'm made up. But I feel like, you know, I think I've only given, this is my third 10 out of 10 I've given a Marvel MCU movie. It's been, I think it's been Winter Soldier, Civil War, and this movie. Is this movie my favorite MCU movie? For right now it is, but you can ask me at any given day on any of these three movies and I can swap them and interchange them. But to me, they're clearly the three best of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, in my opinion, where I stand as of today. It's going to be interesting where they go in the second movie, and I think it's going to be interesting too, and this is part of speculating on what might come, is that I feel like we had the end scene where he, you know, T'Challa goes to the United Nations and he kind of spills the beans on, we're more than what you think we are, and we're going to share our technology and our resources with you guys. And I think that might, especially after we've already seen in the trailer for Infinity War that some of that fight comes to Wakanda. So it's going to be interesting to see, because we already know that was a big conflict, and one of the big storylines that ran throughout the movie was, do we open ourselves up to the outside world and share this cool technology we have to help others? And in doing that, will we open ourselves up to become a target? And if we already know something goes down and maybe Wakandan life is lost in the fight to save the world against Thanos, that it might cause conflict between the four tribes that build up Wakanda, and maybe it brings M'Baku back into direct conflict with T'Challa, and we might get that progression from M'Baku to Manape, and that he might be the big bad. And he's already been set up because we've seen it, and then, you know, where he questioned, now again he begins to question T'Challa's leadership and feel like he's being spread too thin between trying to fight all over the world, being a part of the Avengers, and not being there to rule as the proper king of Wakanda. And that sets up a conflict there, which goes back to the first movie and M'Baku's feelings about why M'Baku's tribe was separate from the rest of the tribes under the Wakandan dynasty. And it goes back to playing on that original riff that was talked about at the very beginning of Black Panther, on how the tribes and how they differed, and how they went off into the mountains and were like totally separate from the rest of, again, the Wakandan kingdom. So I think that might be where it goes. I hope Coogler comes back to direct it, because I think he definitely has his finger on the pulse of this universe and this world, and I want to see him build, because he did a great job of world building. And when I saw this movie and saw how Wakanda was built up as a character in itself, I was like, dang, Marvel missed out on really doing that same thing with Asgard. I always felt like they dropped the ball in making Asgard a character in itself. It always felt like Asgard was an afterthought throughout all of the Thor movies, even Ragnarok, that it was a secondary story plot that they kind of had to deal with. It was never the primary focus, and it was never set up as nicely as Wakanda has been in this movie, and can be a major player throughout the Marvel's cinematic universe moving forward. Not just tied to the Black Panther movies, but just it can be a hub in the Marvel Cinematic Universe world now, how it was set up in this movie. So if I had to give my rankings for the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies at this point, because how many movies do we have at this point? $17, $18? Well, I think Infinity War will be 8, so we have like 17. So I'm going to give my quick rundown of my rankings from worst to first. I'm going to say Thor: The Dark World is still the worst Marvel MCU movie. Iron Man 2, Iron Man 3, Avengers: Age of Ultron, The Incredible Hulk, Doctor Strange, Thor, Ant-Man, Captain America: The First Avenger, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, Spider-Man: Homecoming, Iron Man, The Avengers, Captain America: Civil War, Captain America: The Winter Soldier, and Black Panther. And when we get to those last three, you can switch those around day to day, you know, how I feel about them. I could swap those three positions because they're so close when far as how I feel about the movies. And we still have upcoming, you know, for Marvel, we have Infinity War that comes out in a couple of months. That comes out May 4th. Then 2 months after that, we have Ant-Man and the Wasp. And then that'll be it for 2018. And then we still have, you know, Captain Marvel that it's coming March 2019. So just not quite, well, just a little over a year away. And then we'll have the Avengers Untitled movie that we will get the title for, I guess, after Infinity War drops. That'll be out May 3rd of 2019. And then we have, in 2019, Spider-Man Homecoming 2, or whatever they're going to name the subtitle is going to be for Spider-Man 2, coming out July of 2019. So we still have a ton of movies done right. We still have two more big movies that are going to be dropping, you know, in the next, 3-4 months? Or 5 months. 5 months because of July. So next 5 months. We have two other huge movies that are going to drop. It's going to be interesting to see how it all shakes out in the end. But those are my thoughts on the Black Panther movie. Again, I felt like the performances were phenomenal. The storytelling was great. The direction was great. Special effects were top notch, but they weren't the best. But it did a good job. It wasn't directly tied in to where you get certain things at the end of the movie with the Bucky scene and a White Wolf reference in him going to the United Nations. It'll be interesting to see, you know, what part Wakanda plays in Infinity War and what that means going forward for the cinematic universe, as well as what it might lead into Black Panther 2. They haven't announced anything about a sequel yet, but it would be crazy not to with how successful this movie is doing. So probably, you know, if we're looking at anything, we might get a Black Panther sequel as soon as sometime in 2020. More than likely, we don't know what Phase 4 or whatever they're going to call it is going to look like. All we know is in July of 2019 that Homecoming is from what Feige said is the first Phase 4 movie. So if the Untitled Avengers movie is the end of finally be the end of Phase 3, and sets up what we get in Phase 4 or whatever we're going to call it going forward. So it'll be interesting to see when we come out on the tail end, what the Marvel Cinematic Universe is going to look like after that Avengers 4 next year. So time will tell with that. As always, check out, you can follow me on social media on Twitter, Instagram, and on Facebook. You can follow me, it's at Comic Book Savant. Facebook is facebook.com/Comic Book Savant. The YouTube channel, youtube.com/Comic Book Savant. The Patreon, if you want to help support the show and become a Patreon, it is www.patreon.com/Comic Book Savant. And as well, as I stated earlier, you can check out the website is www.comicbooksavant.com. All the links to the social media, the Patreon, all that kind of stuff is listed there on the website. So definitely check it out and check out the links page. You can find links to the Comics Podcast Network, to other podcasts that I've collaborated with. If you're looking for some shows to check out as well. So again, it's a hub of information there. So don't hesitate if you haven't already. Take a moment to stop by the website and check it out. I try to make it like as informational as possible, and I'm going to look to do in between episodes to maybe write some pieces there and post some offhanded comic reviews and stuff like that as well. Get back to doing that because I used to do that from time to time. But, if you guys want that, just let me know. You can hit me up on social media, or you can always email me. It's the email link on the site. Just click the contact us link, and it'll take you in where you can email me and let me know what you think about that. Again, because I'm trying to give you guys as much content as humanly possible and to keep building up the community. So, if you have any thoughts, suggestions, recommendations, hit me up and send them to me. And I will look into it and try to oblige as much as possible. But that's all I have for you guys for this week. I'll be back next week with another episode of Comic Book Savant. And I will see you guys next week. You guys take care. And again, if you have a friend or anyone that is on the fence about seeing Black Panther and want to see a non-spoiler review, send them over to the Comic Book Savant YouTube channel so they can see the non-spoiler review, which should be up today. I'm going to try to jump on that right now while I'm still feeling a little bit good and before I lay down. So I'm going to jump on that right now. So you can always refer them there for a non-spoiler review. All right, and I'll see you guys next week for another episode. Take care and have a good week.
And into lyrical wholeness. And I know this, and I know this. This I know, this I know.